Elementary music teacher friend, you love what you do, but you might feel unappreciated and, in fact, unseen some days. You may even feel like you're on a music teacher island and just want to connect with other music teachers who can relate to both your struggles and wins when it comes to teaching elementary music. I get you and understand completely the feelings you're having. That's why each and every week, the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast will provide you with solo and guest episodes that will help you realize you're not alone in your music teaching journey. Throughout each episode, my goal is for you to be able to walk away with actionable steps and ideas to help you feel like you're ready to take on the new week with whatever challenges may be thrown your way. Hi, I'm your host, Jessica Peresta, and I'm so glad you're here. Whether you're at home, in your car, in the shower, or wherever else you're listening, grab your cup of coffee or whatever other beverage is nearby and listen in to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast.
I'm Rachel Johnson, co-host of the EduGals podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey friend, I want to let you know about a free workshop that I am so excited about called How to Design Curriculum for Your Elementary Music Classroom, 5 Easy Ways to Simplify Lesson Planning. This free workshop will happen live at various dates and times throughout the year. So sign up so you'll be notified when the workshop is. And you can go to subscribepage.com/curriculum design workshop or simply click on the link in the show notes. In this workshop, we'll go over starting with the end in mind, knowing your desired results for yourself and students, planning assessment before mapping out the lessons, and having a system in place. When you come to this workshop, I'm going to show you how you can make the ultimate shift from struggling with weekly lesson planning, feeling overwhelmed and exhausted knowing how to plan relevant lessons, to knowing how and what to plan each week by adding systems and a proven framework to your planning. So to sign up, once again, the link is subscribepage.com/curriculum design workshop, and I can't wait to see you there. Hey friend, welcome back to the podcast. I hope you're having an amazing summer so far and that you are getting to do things that you like to do, right? Whether that's relaxing, whether you're going swimming, whether you're just catching up on projects that are long overdue because you didn't have time to do them during the school year, or whether you're listening to this and you're not done yet with the school year. Wherever you're at, I am just cheering you on, and I hope that you are able to find that time to really do things for fun when you're also combining it with work. I know for me, this summer, I am not only presenting at, but I'm also attending several different professional development opportunities, both in person and online. And I'm also definitely planning on our calendar times for fun. And so I think it's just about, which I've talked about before, being intentional with your calendar and knowing what you have going on so you can intentionally block off days to say, I'm not doing any kind of work today or cleaning my house or anything like that, but I'm just going to have a fun summer day. And so I hope you're finding time to do that. Today's episode is our next episode in the summer series. Our first episode was last week, and it was all about my favorite music education blog post. Today's episode is my favorite podcast. So I literally decided that I'm going to just open up my Apple Podcast, and I want to just share with you what I have on here. I have a whole different, I'm not going to name everyone because I am a podcast listener. I'm not just a podcaster. I love listening to podcasts. Especially when I'm in the car by myself, which is very rare because I have 3 boys, but I love listening to podcasts. And I'm always kind of in the mood for something different each time. Sometimes I love to listen to music education podcasts. Sometimes I love to listen to general education podcasts. Other times I listen to business podcasts, podcast about being a mom, podcast about, I'm looking here while I'm talking. What else do I have on here? Podcast about just, well, home, keeping a home and cleaning and things like that. And that's pretty much the gist of it. Oh, I also have some crime podcasts too, which, what does that say about me? I don't know. But I'm not going to read you every single one I have on here. But if you want to pick my brain about other podcast ideas, just send me a message on Instagram at Jessica Presta and let me know. But what I want to do is definitely going to start with the music education ones I love. And then I'll share a few of the businessy ones I like listening to, because those of you that have been here a while know that not only do I run my own business, but I also do business coaching. If you're curious about that, let me know. But I also, the way I've grown a lot in business and learning things that I didn't know was by, first of all, consuming podcasts and blog posts, but then I would, I enrolled in some courses and membership sites to help me along the way. So I want to kind of share some that have really helped me as well, if you're curious in that. But most of this is going to be music education ones. So I'm just going to go right down my list here. The first one is hashtag music ed love. This is with the amazing Angela Ammerman. And you can find any of these podcasts on any of your favorite podcast listening platforms, not just Apple, Spotify, whatever else is your cup of tea. But Music Ed Love, Angela Ammerman I got the honor of being a guest on hers, and she's been on mine as well. But I met her through a virtual friend, which is so weird saying that, but that's where we met. We're both part of a women music education entrepreneur mastermind, I guess you could say, where we come together like once every couple months just to chat. And I got to meet her there, and we just really clicked. And I am just so impressed by her work with, she's a professor and she's a nationally renowned presenter, and her interviews are so good. And so a lot of them are with various people in the music education industry, whether that is professors, teachers, solo topics she talks about. I mean, just I'm like literally looking through episodes as I chat here. As you can tell, these summer episodes are a little more informal, which was my goal here. But yeah, hers, I like it because it's not just like mine is very niche. It's for elementary music teachers. Hers is for any music teacher, and it's about a variety of topics that I really think you would find helpful. The next one I'm looking at here is the AOSA podcast. I don't know if you knew the American Orff Shorework Association had a podcast, but they have it's newish, I think, because they have 8 episodes. I'm looking right now. Yeah, looks like 8 episodes. And so it's not very many episodes, but the ones they do have, I've actually gotten a lot out of them. Particularly the last one I listened to was about diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. And so I know that's a big topic nowadays. It should be a big topic all the days, but this is, if you have questions around that, it is kind of it's an interview with someone who's very knowledgeable in this topic area. And I really got a lot from that episode. Okay, so I said I'm going to do music ed ones first. The next one is Becca's Music Room. I actually mentioned her last week, her blog. So Becca is just great. She has a podcast that a lot of the episodes come from YouTube lives or from her YouTube channel when she went live there. But I think that it's great that she's providing them on her podcast as well, because I know if you're like me, sometimes I like to watch things and other times I like to listen. But she has a variety of activities that she mainly talks about what she uses in her classroom. So she's trying out things and then sharing with you guys or the listeners what she enjoys doing. The next podcast, as a music education podcast, is called Chaotic Harmony. This is with 4 music teachers who have conversations just very casually with each other around different things going on in their classroom, or topics that are near dear to their heart, or what's going on in the world, or how do we bring this to our students, and about different conferences. So that is one I like listening to as well, and I would suggest it. Victoria Bowler, I also mentioned her last week. She has a podcast called Elemental Conversations. And by the way, all these podcasts I'm going to link to a blog post where all these podcasts will be listed there. But her podcast is really good. Like I said during last week's episode, her blog posts, the same thing with her podcast episodes. She goes really, really in detail about a lot of things. I really enjoy a lot of her episodes are answering questions that come in from music teachers. And then she goes into detail explaining just explaining her answer and goes into detail and really does a good job with clarifying whatever questions there may be around different teaching topics. Another good podcast is How to Teach Music with Jessica Grant. If you've heard of her podcast used to be called Afternoon Tea, and TI for solfege, but she just changed it to How to Teach Music with Jessica Grant. Oh my goodness. If you are not familiar with Jessica, I don't just like her because she has the same name as me. She is just an amazing teacher, and I finally got to meet her in person last year in Philly, and we'll get to see each other again if she's going this August in Philly. But I like listening to her. She's very ORF focused, but also I really get a lot out of her episodes around upper elementary or middle school age. She has all these amazing projects she tries with her students that, to be honest with you, I would have just never thought of on my own. And so I don't, and she's also good with integrating technology. I know during COVID, I had her come and talk to my members in the Harmony membership, and she was just sharing some ideas about what she did, not just what technology I use, but how she created lessons using various technology platforms. So she does a great job just really explaining some good lesson plans that are kind of out of the box and really, really cool. Another one is Music for Kiddos. Stephanie Leavell has also been on my podcast, as has Jessica Grant. Music for Kiddos is exactly what it sounds like. She's a music therapist, but she also is a songwriter. And so she has so many awesome lessons to do with the little kiddos. And I know sometimes that is a struggle point for some music teachers. Some of you may be asked to teach pre-K or even 3-year-olds. I'm not certified to teach 3-year-olds. So I wish I had had something like her resource back in the day when I taught those little bitties. And so and a lot of her songs are, like I said, she's written them and she's also created an album. You can find it on Spotify as well. And so it's really, really good, by the way. Music Teacher Coffee Talk is another one by Tanya and Carrie. They are two friends. If they're listening, I'm going to call them besties because they really, honestly, it's fun watching them because or hearing about them. They go and present in person together all the time. They come on their podcast and chit chat all the time. They collaborate a lot with each other about what they're doing in their classrooms and things like that. And so they are both Kodály focused teachers, and they really go kind of conversational, just like I talked about in other podcasts. They talk a lot about this is what's working. This is what I'm struggling with. This went well with this grade level this week. This is something I want to try differently, and just really open and candid conversations on their podcast. Music Tech Teacher Podcast with Katie Wardrobe is one I also recommend. She is, just like the title of the podcast suggests, she talks a lot about music tech, not just music tech to use with your students, but organizational type of technology, technology you can use for productivity, all kinds of different tech. So if you're curious about that, she is literally the GOAT, as you know, the boys will say, or girls, GOAT, the greatest of all time when talking about music technology. She's awesome. And so I would highly suggest that podcast. Music Cast, MUSI Cast, is the F Flat Books podcast. This one's great because there is a lot of different episodes that are being recorded by, just like the blog post I mentioned last week, but different podcast episodes being recorded by various authors that are F Flat book authors. And I've been on there and gotten the opportunity to share. And basically you go on there and you can share a topic that's near and dear to your heart. So the F Flat listeners, or you, if you're listening to this podcast, you get to listen to a lot of different, not just topics around music education, but different perspectives, different personalities and people that are doing their different episodes. All right, let me scroll down here. There's a podcast I love called Talking Up Music Education. This is actually the NAMM Foundation's podcast. If I can be perfectly honest with you, I like this podcast, but looking at it, I have not listened to a lot of their episodes in a while just because of busyness. I was wrapping up my master's degree and all the other things, but the ones I have listened to, and I really want to dive back into this podcast because it's great. They interview a lot of different musicians and music educators and have a ton of different conversations around all things music education. The next one is Teaching Music Tomorrow. This is with Victoria Bowler and Ann Molesky. It's a newer podcast by them where they are giving you short and actionable lesson ideas that you can literally implement as little or as quickly as tomorrow. Their goal with this is, instead of talking about the broader range of planning and what you could do, it's just, here's a simple lesson you can try. Here's what you can do with your students for rhythmic concepts and all kinds of different things. So that is one that it's really, really cool. I love that they started that together. So speaking of Ann Molesky, her podcast is the Anna Kruzik podcast. This is one of the very first music education podcasts I actually listened to before I decided to start my own. And now I love that I get to consider Ann a personal friend of mine. Her Goodness, y'all, her podcast, I probably have listened to, I'm scrolling through and it's showing I've listened to probably about, I would say, a good 70% of her episodes, all the way back from the beginning. She is a Gadai Center teacher, but I love that she really caters to talking about kindergarten music, because if I can be honest, and I've shared this before in all vulnerability, that has been something I've struggled with, is kindergarten music or lower elementary music. And she does a great job in explaining what to do, really goes into what resources you can use. She talks about different ideas to do with students and how to help students retain melodic and rhythmic concepts. She just really is a great teacher. I mean, she just is. She's a really great at explaining it in a way that's easy to understand, and she's a great presenter, so of course that makes sense. So I would highly suggest Ann's podcast. The next one I want to talk about is Teaching Social Emotional Learning Through Music. This is the Music for All Foundation in Yamaha. So basically, this whole podcast is social emotional learning in the music classroom. And I remember when I first started listening, I'm like, well, how can you have each episode be about social emotional learning? And because of course it's important, but I was like, oh, this is interesting. But when I started listening to the different podcast episodes, it is so cool to hear these interviews that are about the same topic, but they're from different perspectives and different teachers coming in to talk about what it means to them or different strategies you can try with your students. That music teacher with Bryson Tarbett is a great one. He is great about talking about topics that are like neurodiverse students and how to work with them when that might be a little bit difficult to know how to do that. He's begun bringing on a lot more guests that have great conversations. He's a great interviewer, and I really enjoy hearing the various conversations he has around several different topics on his podcast. There is another one called Music Ed Mentor Podcast. This is with the amazing Elisa Jansen Jones. She has had this podcast for a while, and yeah, it's a good podcast because it's not centered towards just any grade level, but it's for any music educator, a lot of different conversations, a lot of different perspectives on her podcast as well. There are such good podcasts out there, you guys. So do your research. Just try to find the podcasts that resonate with you and that will help teach you and keep you going, because there's so many great ones. Mrs. Miracle's Music Room. This is with Aileen Miracle, and hers are pretty short. There are a lot of episodes where she has conversations or interviews, but the solo episodes are, which I'm trying to get better on my podcast. And as you can tell, it hasn't always gone well, but I'm trying to keep them 30 minutes or less. But she does a great job of keeping the episodes short and actionable, and really goes into what she does in her classroom. She is a seasoned teacher. And Aileen, if you're listening, I'm not calling you old, I promise, because we've started teaching around the same time. And so we're both dinosaurs, but she has been around for a long time. And so she knows her stuff. She has so many great ideas. She is great about implementing new ideas with her students. She talks a lot about centers and some creative ideas she does with that are really, really cool. The next podcast I want to mention is The Score with Eric and Justin. This podcast is, of course, has grown to be a favorite by so many music teachers. They go into so many amazing topics about, working with kids from inner city and like band focused. They're both band directors, so they talk a lot about working with kids in the band room, but in a way that challenges the status quo. And so they have so many conversations, not just about band, but I really like their perspectives and their conversations, and they're not afraid to kind of step on some toes in their conversations. So give them a listen. It is a great, great podcast. And the last one I want to mention is the Make Moments Matter Music Education podcast with David Rao. He goes live on Facebook and Instagram, I think once a week. I mean, he is really good about doing that. And he usually shares a different grade level each week. What am I doing with first grade, or what am I doing with second, and so on and so forth. And then he shares the replay of that onto his podcast. So I'll do another summer series episode later in the summer about social media, and he'll probably be included in that one as well. But if you're a podcast listener, I would suggest just listening to the podcast because it's great. And he shares a lot of great ideas. So those were some music education ones. And I told you I would end by sharing some other ones that I love that aren't necessarily music education related. So I'm just going to go back through my list again and not name every single one. I told you guys I listen to podcasts. I have a ton of them on here. There's a podcast called Truth for Teachers. This is by Angela Watson. So it's not just for music education. It's for any teacher. That one is very good. Ask Pat is a podcast I really like, where he does different coaching calls with people who are starting an online business, and they just come on to ask him questions. I have really enjoyed listening to that one. Let's see, what else do I have here? The podcast called Crush the Rush with Holly Haynes is a great business podcast. The Expert Edge podcast with Colin Boyd is one I really enjoy. Flipped Lifestyle podcast. These are both actually former teachers who now run a $1 million business. A podcast called Marketing Made Simple. And what else is here? Not Your Average Online Marketing podcast with Zach Spuckler is an amazing one. Online Marketing Made Easy with Amy Porterfield. Another one called Online Marketing Podcast with Paul and Melissa Pruitt. And I'm going to skip some of these because some of these I haven't listened to in a while. The Art of Online Business with Rick Mulready is actually one of my very, very favorite ones. The CEO Teacher Podcast with Casey Morris. And the Jasmine Star Show is a great one. The Mind Your Business Podcast with James Wedmore. And I think, one more. The Teacher Career Coach Podcast is awesome. So she's great about bringing on guests that talk about their former teachers and now what they do still in an education role. But maybe it's not so much K-12 education, but even her last interview was with what if you want to stay in the classroom? And so I really enjoy her podcast. It's awesome. So if you have any podcasts you recommend, please tag me on social media either on Facebook or Instagram and let me know what yours is. And also share a favorite episode, tag that podcast creator and let them know you love their podcast and why you do. Also, I would love to remind you that when you leave a review, whether it's for mine or any other podcast, Spotify, you can leave reviews now, I believe, but also Apple Podcast. When you leave a review, it really does help your show to get found because it will recommend your show to other people listening to different shows, and it helps get it found more so by the people who need to hear it. So I would highly suggest you do that if you want to just thank a podcaster, leave them a review and let them know you like their work. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll be back next week with another summer series episode. Well, hey there. Thank you so much for listening into the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. There is an exclusive Facebook group just for listeners of this podcast and any elementary music teacher called the Elementary Music Teacher Community Facebook group. Come on over and join us there where we have conversations around the podcast episodes and encourage each other each and every week. And also head to my website, thedomesticmusician.com. I have some free resources there that you can download to help you gain traction in your classroom today, as well as the blog and the membership site and all kinds of other goodies to help you keep going in your music teaching journey. I cannot wait to keep connecting with you and encouraging you and spurring you on in your journey of teaching elementary music. Hang in there, have an amazing week, and I will see you soon.